February 23, 1945. Mount Suribachi, Iwo Jima. Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto crouched in the cold shadow of a concrete bunker, hands trembling as he pressed pencil to paper. His breaths came shallow, his face streaked with soot and fear. Outside, the world was on fire. The roar of naval guns had not stopped for days. The very earth seemed to breathe in explosions, the air thick with dust and the smell of sulfur. From the firing slit of his bunker, Tadashi could see black sand and bodies of American Marines. Advancing again, he wrote words that could have cost him his life if any officer read them. The Marines are not human. They do not die like other men. Everything we were told about American weakness was a lie. Moments earlier, he had seen 6 Marines charge through his sector under withering machine gun fire. 3 fell before they reached cover, but the others didn't stop. A grenade exploded among them. One Marine threw himself over it, absorbing the blast and still, impossibly, the survivors kept coming. Tadashi's comrades screamed in disbelief as flamethrowers roared. The Marines took the position in minutes. 21,000 Japanese soldiers had dug themselves into Iwo Jima tunnels, caves, and bunkers carved deep into the rock. They had been promised that the Americans were weak, undisciplined, unfit for hardship. Yet everything they faced now defied that belief. From above, Mount Suribachi shook as though alive. Beneath it, men were dying by the hundreds every hour. 3 years earlier, no Japanese soldier would have believed this was possible. August 7, 1942, Guadalcanal. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, veteran of the China campaign, had written in his journal after his first encounter with the Marines, "The Americans who landed here are not like others. They do not retreat when surrounded. They fight as if darkness gives them strength." That was Japan's first defensive battle in the Pacific. Tokyo believed it would be an easy victory, one division of Marines landing on a jungle island, far from home. But within days, every expectation collapsed. Lieutenant Shigeru Fukudome led a company ordered to retake Henderson Field. 200 men, confident and trained in night fighting, advanced in perfect formation. The Americans would panic in darkness. That's what every officer believed. They didn't. The Marines waited in silence. When the Japanese came within range, the night exploded. Interlocking fields of fire cut through the jungle. Automatic weapons, mortars, and precision that felt impossible. By dawn, Fukudome's company was gone. 90 men crawled back. 12 Marines were dead. It was the first hint that Japan's myth of invincibility was cracking. Back on Iwo Jima, Tadashi had learned those stories as warnings. But until now, he had never understood them. He had believed in Bushido, the way of the warrior, death before dishonor. Yet the Marines, somehow, had adopted that same spirit and amplified it. They were willing to die. Yes, but they fought with the weight of an empire that could afford to lose them. He watched as more landing craft approached through smoke and fire. Men poured out, dragging supplies, flamethrowers, bulldozers, tanks. The noise was unbearable, the will of it terrifying. Inside his bunker, the walls shuddered as shells from American destroyers smashed the ridge. Dust fell from the ceiling like snow. Tadashi could hear his own heart pounding. They do not stop. He whispered to no one. Even when the world ends, they will keep coming. The Marines called it hell. The black volcanic sand swallowed their boots. Each step forward a war on gravity itself. The beach offered no cover, just death from above. But they kept advancing. Machine gun nests raked the shoreline, and still they climbed. Private Jack Weaver of the 28th Marines remembered later, "We weren't fighting to win that hour, or that day. We were fighting because stopping wasn't an option." That was the essence of it. Momentum turned religion. Behind them, battleships thundered. In front of them, bunkers spat fire. Between the two, Marines moved like a tide that refused to ebb. 2 years earlier, on Tarawa, the world had seen this same madness. Rear Admiral Shibasaki had promised that 1,000,000 men cannot take Tarawa in 100 years. The Marines did it in 76 hours. Private Tadashi Ogawa, one of 17 Japanese survivors, later told interrogators, "We killed hundreds. The first wave drowned in the water. The second died on the beach. The third reached us. They did not stop until we were all dead." The math was brutal. 4,500 Japanese defenders, nearly all killed. Over 1,000 Marines dead. The island was small enough to walk across in an hour, but it was paved with corpses. That was when Japan's high command stopped believing in victory and began believing in delay. Every island became a grave meant to buy time. By 1944, Japan's intelligence officers had stopped calling Marines soldiers. They called them Shikeki Butai shock troops. A captured document from Saipan described them simply: Marines refuse orders to retreat. Casualties do not diminish their strength. Units remain effective until completely destroyed. Captain Yoshio Kobayashi, a survivor of Guadalcanal, wrote, "The Marines fight like fire. If you strike at them, they split and burn around you." What terrified Japanese officers most wasn't the Marines' weapons, it was their system. Junior leaders made decisions that, in Japan, only captains dared make. If a squad leader died, the next man took over instantly. If a plan failed, someone improvised. That speed made them unstoppable. On Iwo Jima, Tadashi saw this for himself. Every time his company destroyed a flamethrower team, another took its place. Every time a bunker fell silent, Marines appeared from the smoke, crawling forward, throwing grenades, shouting to each other through the chaos. He saw one Marine crawling on his elbows, legs shredded, dragging a demolition charge under machine gun fire. He reached the bunker and detonated it. The explosion buried both him and the defenders inside. Tadashi could not look away. "They are not men," he wrote that night. "They are a force. Each death only makes the rest stronger." General Kurabayashi, commanding Iwo Jima's defense, had understood this long before the first landing. He banned suicidal banzai charges, calling them useless waste. Instead, he turned the island into a fortress, 11 miles of tunnels, 1,500 caves, artillery hidden under layers of rock. His goal was not to win, but to delay. He told his men, "We cannot stop the Americans. We can only make them pay for every meter of ground." It was a grim kind of honor. And for 36 days, they did. 20,000 Marines were killed or wounded. Almost every Japanese soldier died when the flag was raised on Mount Suribachi. The photograph went around the world, but no picture could capture what it cost. When the flag rose over Mount Suribachi, the battle was not yet won. Down below, the beaches still burned. The mountain slopes were littered with shattered helmets, broken rifles, and the smell of cordite so thick it stung the eyes. Yet for one heartbeat, the island seemed to pause. The wind caught the cloth, the flag rippled against the smoke, and both sides, those who lived and those already dying, knew the outcome was written for the Marines. It was proof that no fire could stop them. For the Japanese, it was the moment they understood the inevitable. But even inevitability has a cost. Inside his bunker, Tadashi Yamamoto felt the tremor as another shell slammed into the rock above him. The light bulb flickered. His hands were bleeding from gripping the rifle too tightly. He could no longer hear orders. The battle had become a storm of instinct. Somewhere outside, an American shouted, "Forward!" The word cut through the noise like thunder. The Americans never said retreat. He pressed his diary to his chest. "We are dying," he wrote, "but they do not stop. They move like the tide, constant, unfeeling. How do you fight the sea?" The sea itself was America's greatest weapon. Every sunrise brought more ships, an endless gray horizon filled with power. Each vessel carried supplies enough to feed an army for months. When Japanese soldiers ran out of bullets, Marines received fresh ammunition by the truckload. When Japanese wounded bled out in caves, Marines were carried to hospital ships where surgeons worked through the night. That difference was more than numbers. It was time itself. Japan was fighting yesterday. The United States was already in tomorrow. Kurabayashi's men fought with honor, but honor could not reload an empty rifle. Each day they fired less and bled more. They lived in darkness, surrounded by the dead. And still the Americans kept coming. On the 9th day, Tadashi's unit held a narrow trench overlooking the beach. His friend, Corporal Soto, whispered, "Do you think they ever feel fear?" Tadashi didn't answer. He watched a Marine crawl across open ground, dragging a wounded comrade by the belt. Bullets struck all around him, kicking up sand like rain. The Marine didn't flinch. When a shot hit his shoulder, he paused, switched arms, and kept pulling. Soto lowered his rifle. "Maybe that's what fear looks like," he said softly. That night, as shells fell farther inland, Tadashi wrote again, "We were taught that courage is to die without hesitation. The Americans believe courage is to live no matter what it costs. Perhaps both are the same." By the 20th day, the island had become a furnace. Caves collapsed under flamethrowers. Tunnels filled with smoke. Kurabayashi's radio operators sent their last transmission. "Our defense continues. The enemy numbers are endless." Then silence. When the general finally fell, his body was never found. Some say he died leading a final charge. Others say he took his life in the tunnels. But his final message, intercepted by American signals, reached Tokyo. "I have fought the Marines for 31 days. They are the finest soldiers I have ever known. They will not stop until all of us are dead." When the guns finally ceased, Iwo Jima was nothing but black rubble and ghosts. 21,000 Japanese defenders gone. 7,000 Marines dead, 19,000 wounded. And yet, within 6 weeks, their divisions were replenished and ready for the next assault. That was the difference. America could replace its losses. Japan could only mourn them. For the survivors of both sides, victory had no joy. It was simply exhaustion wearing a uniform. The war rolled on to Okinawa, the last and bloodiest. By then, the Japanese no longer believed they could win. They fought only to delay the inevitable invasion of their homeland. The Marines landed again, and again the sky turned black. 82 days of relentless combat. Civilians fled into caves. Soldiers fought until nothing remained to fight with. A Japanese captain recorded in his final note, "We thought the Marines were men made of flesh. They are made of purpose." When the bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the war ended not with a final battle, but with a silence too heavy to bear. The Marines prepared for an invasion that never came. Japan surrendered. The Pacific, at last, exhaled. And then came the strangest sight of all. The conquerors arriving not with hate, but with mercy. Marines distributed food, medicine, blankets. They treated the wounded enemy with the same care as their own. The Japanese people, starved and broken, watched in disbelief. Private Tishi Yoshida, once sworn to die for the emperor, later said, "Everything we were told was lies." The Marines did not torture. They helped us stand. In the years that followed, both nations rebuilt from ashes. The men who had faced each other through guns now met as veterans beneath white tents and fluttering flags. They bowed to one another. Some wept. Some could not speak at all. On one such day, an aging Marine shook hands with a Japanese officer who had defended Saipan. The Marine said, "We fought hard." The officer nodded. "Yes," he replied, "too hard. But now we remember together." That simple exchange carried more peace than any treaty. Time softened what history had seared. The islands once soaked in blood became green again. Ponds grew where shells had landed. Children played in the surf where men once fell. Yet the ground still hummed with memory. At Iwo Jima, visitors walk the beach and find bits of shrapnel glinting in the sand. The mountain looms above them, silent, eternal. Sometimes, in the still air, the sea seems to speak a low, steady murmur like a heartbeat. If you listen long enough, you can hear the rhythm of the past, not the roar of war, but the pulse of endurance. For the Japanese, the lesson was humility. Spirit alone could not conquer steel. For the Marines, the lesson was humanity, that victory bought in blood demands compassion in peace. Together they taught the world the same truth. Courage without mercy is destruction, and mercy without courage is surrender. Only the balance of both keeps civilization alive. Decades later, when reporters asked an old Japanese veteran what he remembered most, he said, "The sound." "What sound?" they asked. "The sound of them coming. The sound of Marines." That was what haunted every survivor, the relentless rhythm of boots on sand. The echo of men who refused to stop. And yet that same rhythm became the heartbeat of peace. Every generation since has lived in its echo. The world they left behind is far from perfect, but it is alive because they endured. The Marines carried forward their creed: honor, courage, commitment, not as words of war, but as the discipline to hold fast. when the world shakes. Japan carried forward its own rebirth industry, resilience, and a devotion to peace as strong as the warriors once devoted to battle. Opposites once locked in death now moved together toward life. Sometimes, at dawn, the Pacific looks exactly as it did in 1945, mist hanging low, waves breaking in slow thunder, a gull circling high above. But the sound now is laughter from fishermen, the hiss of waves against hulls, the whisper of memory rather than the roar of guns. The island breathes again. The sea forgives. The world remembers, because they were told to take the island. And they did. They were told to keep moving, and they never stopped. Now it is our turn to keep moving, not through fire, but through time, carrying their story with us, not as myth, but as reminder that the strength to endure, once born in war, can build a peace that lasts longer than any victory. The Pacific still speaks. Its voice is the rhythm of waves, eternal and patient. It says only this: remember, endure, keep moving.